Hello, and welcome to our discussion today on Unbreakable Cloud Storage for your data center. I'm Julie Greene, the Senior Director of Corporate Marketing here at Scality, and I'm joined today with Paul Speciale, our Chief Marketing Officer. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Julie. It's great to be here today, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
Great. So today we're going to jump into a few hot topics, and some of them maybe even a little bit controversial with our IT folks. And we're going to discuss three main topics today. First is evaluating public versus private cloud for data storage. Second, well, I think you're going to give some practical tips for protecting your data against ransomware. And three, we'll look at data storage costs and the real savings that customers are experiencing. Like, for example, what does it really cost to store, manage, and access large-scale and siloed data? And is there a difference in cost between on-premises and cloud storage? So let's get started, Paul. My first question is public cloud storage the perfect solution?
Well, I think the answer is on the slide. I'm going to just come out on a limb and say no, it is not the perfect storage solution, especially if you consider the spectrum of things we need to do. There are lots of good things about public cloud storage, lots of pros, lots of advantages, but there's also some cons. And I think you and I are going to go through some of that analysis a little bit more carefully.
Right. Okay, so let's make this even a little more interesting. This claim on the slide is really hard to believe. We all hear lots of numbers being thrown around by vendors. So is this even possible?
The answer is yes, it is possible. I think there are a lot of claims. You have to always take them with a grain of salt. But really what you want to do is dig beneath the covers. How have they computed this? And I think this number is going to be proven later through real world data. So we're going to talk about a study where it's actually been extracted from customer usage.
Okay, great. So we'll come back to that later. I would really like to know what you're hearing from our customers. I think there's a lot of challenges with data, and we already know that data is growing. That's super obvious, right? But it would be great if you could share some of the not so obvious challenges that you see customers trying to overcome.
Yeah, you said it. It's obvious enough where we don't have to restate things about data growth. I think, the thing that's beneath the covers, put yourself in the shoes of an enterprise IT person. What are you asked to do? You're always asked to do more, right? More data, more devices to manage, more threats to your data. Now ransomware is there. We're going to talk about that more. The dirty secret is that you're not getting a lot more resource, right? So you need to be more efficient in how you manage all this. And then on top of that, you're being asked to maintain costs, right? So I think this cloud-like economics model is attractive, and it's something that people want to preserve. But the heart of this problem, I think from our perspective here, is the data.
Right. Yeah. And I think maybe the number one challenge customers are facing right now is keeping their data protected, right?
Yeah, data has always been valuable. It's so valuable now. I know we're going to talk about a few statistics, but this ransomware increase, the number of attacks is just ramped up. It's one more threat. It's not the only threat, but it's one more threat. So maybe just to dive in a little bit about data, right? And I think it's another thing that people already know very well. Every industry we deal with is now very digital. Banking and medical and genomics and government, everything. You almost can't find an exception to that rule. The data is so valuable now that people are paying millions of dollars just to really protect it against this variety of threats. I think the other thing is that people need to keep the data online longer now. If you think about media and entertainment, they keep the data just so they can repurpose it and monetize it later, right? Like a video gets reissued. Medical, it takes on a whole new meaning to keep the data long term because it's our medical scans, it's our livelihood, right? It's really our health. There's so many threats now, but people are putting huge investments. I heard that Netflix now spends $1 billion on big data per year for customer retention, right? So it's just to really be careful with that data in the face of all of these threats.
Right. And I really think it's interesting. I mean, it's obvious that big data is growing and the market's growing, as you see on the stats to the right. But the one interesting fact here is that 95% of businesses are citing that the need to manage unstructured data is a problem for their business. So unstructured data being like video files and PDFs and images, and yeah, all of
Yeah,
it.
it's everything that doesn't fit into a database and rolling columns easily, and you can easily see that that is the bulk of the data in terms of volume.
Right, which is some of the hardest data to manage, quite
It
honestly.
is because it's the most voluminous.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we know that that data has to be protected, and there's lots of threats and lots of considerations. But let's really get into the ransomware discussion now. It's really impacting multiple businesses on multiple fronts.
It is. I mean, we all hear the metrics are increasing, right? The attacks
Yeah.
now come, what is it, every few seconds across the globe. Look at this number here. The average bill now is almost $2 million, for recovering from a ransomware attack. That's not just paying the ransom, but it's the time in the people, right? And I'm really struck now by the fact that, look at this stat, only 13% of organizations do not pay the ransom. That's quite wild, right? Because if you pay the ransom, you would almost think it's going to make you more susceptible to another attack.
Everyone's paying the ransom. That's so
Yeah.
scary. And the
Well,
other thing is, oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to.
no, that's okay. I was going to say, look at the downtime, right?
Yeah,
20 plus days of downtime. That's got to cost businesses a lot.
exactly. So, and what the other thing is, it's not just cost of money, it's your brand suffering too, right? The 53% of organizations report their brand is suffering as a result of a ransomware attack. And we see that when the news hits. It's
We
not
do.
good.
It's very impactful, right? Companies really suffer when they're attacked. Obviously, there's a trust issue with that. Look, I think in the end, you and I, we've talked about this before. It's a matter of when, not if, these attacks will happen to a company,
Exactly.
right?
Okay.
You really need to be ready.
Right. Okay. So that leads us to the second big point we're going to throw out there, maybe a little bit controversial again, but you can't really depend on public cloud storage to meet all the challenges you mentioned earlier, plus keep data protected from all threats, and most importantly, ransomware.
Yeah, I said it before. It cannot be the sole storage solution. It is very popular. I mean, look at Amazon S3 and Azure Blob Storage and other large cloud services. They're extremely popular. People are putting money into it, and it's because there are some advantages. I mean, I think we have a few points on the next slide.
Yeah.
You and I, we certainly know that this on-demand agility of the cloud is a really big selling point, right? And it's why
Right.
people jump into it. If you need a resource, rather than having to buy servers and install them, you just have them on demand. That's great.
Right.
And it comes with this sort of, virtually limitless scalability. I think that's really great.
Right. And what about the topic of these rich features or rich services? What is this exactly?
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think it's a pretty big point. Public cloud is not just the storage, right? It's the compute. Obviously, that's been in place for a while. But every year, the vendors offer new and richer services, things like analytics, and video delivery and search. There's just so much new capabilities, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Those are services that we all need to use. And I think in a very intelligent and balanced approach, as we're going to talk about later, some use of the public cloud is going to be part of every company's business. But when we talk about rich feature set, it's that aspect of it.
Okay, great. Okay, but all the great features are fantastic, but let's talk about the disadvantages of public cloud.
Right. As with everything, it's a pro and con thing, right? And we really want to retain those pros in any solution we go forward. But what about the cons, right? And I think what we hear from our customers is the big thing is loss of control, right? Once you go to the cloud, you're kind of inheriting those processes and those procedures, things like managing keys in the cloud format and making sure that they're rotated. You don't want your IT people or your employees to make use of the cloud in a shadow IT way. That's
Yeah.
a loss of control,
We hear
right?
about that.
Yeah, we do. I mean, you can just use a credit card to dial up resources, and that's kind of a bad practice, right? Lack of data sovereignty is another one we hear a lot. Can you keep the data where you want it, in the right region or in the right country? Performance, sometimes you have an application that is on-prem, and then having cloud storage is not going to work. And this high TCO thing, ultimately, people think that it's cheap to go to the cloud because it's pay as you go, but there are a lot of hidden costs beneath that.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a little bit of the elephant in the room when discussing cloud and versus on premises is the cost topic, but we're going to get to that again later. But it is one other thing I wanted to ask is, it is really interesting to hear that the cloud security is a strength
Mhm.
when, but here we're saying that security, privacy, data leakage are at the top of customers' concerns for public cloud storage. So how do you reconcile what the messages are versus what customers are experiencing?
Yeah, I think they have improved the security set. There's no doubt about it. Things like, encryption of data and authentication and access control, they're getting stronger. I think it's more in creating a cohesive process between what the enterprise IT data center does on-prem and what is in the public cloud. We need to marry that together and fill the holes, right? And one of the key holes here is things like making data immutable. That's not supported in every cloud, right? And that's going to be something that we really, really need for ransomware recovery and protection.
Okay, and I know you're going to be talking about immutability a little bit later in this.
We are, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last thing about the not reversible bullet, is that really true that you can't pull data back from the cloud once it's up there?
Well, of course you can. Data goes in and it goes in for free.
Right.
And once you have, many gigabytes or terabytes or even more in the cloud, you could take it out. It'll take a lot of time, and guess what? It'll cost you a lot of money because egress is not free. Taking the data out has a fee, and that's one of the hidden things that we talk about in this higher TCO. Every time you touch the data, every time you want to take it out, there is a fee associated with that. I think the other thing we need to say on cloud is it's a service. It's not a product, right? And so behind the scenes, what's happening? There are people running it, right?
Exactly.
Usually dozens or hundreds of people are managing the service, and you have to pay for that somehow.
And lots of hardware too, by the way.
Of course, it still runs on something.
Infrastructure is still there. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about how people are now saying to fill the gap, which we've all heard this buzzword over the last few years and maybe 10 years is
Right.
hybrid cloud. And many IT teams are choosing hybrid cloud over an all-in public cloud offering. So I think
Yeah. I think enterprises by default use both. They have IT data centers and they have the public cloud. And even those that aren't using it for infrastructure are using SaaS applications in their industry. So by nature, they're already doing this. But what we're really talking about is making single use cases across public, private, and public cloud. From a data perspective, which is what we're talking about, there's a lot of obvious choices here, right? Like backup. Short-term backups and long-term backups can straddle the line between private and public cloud. You can have copies of data on premises in your data center and in the public cloud for disaster recovery. That might be actually a great solution when it comes to ransomware protection. But what we're finding is that this intelligent and balanced use of both, the hybrid cloud approach, is really what fills all the gaps and gives you the best solution.
And that's what also helps improve the cost, right? Because you can store colder tier data on-prem.
Yes.
And have a lower cost structure for that over the long haul.
Right. And sometimes you have a use case that's bursty. Think about it, right? At Christmas, we all know that there's a big, rush of e-commerce. Maybe you need to burst resources at that time, but then you can spin it down and not pay the long-term costs in the cloud.
Okay, yeah. And also you could, if you really do want to get your data up in the cloud or more of your data up in the cloud, you have an easy transition to that, to going to the public cloud.
Yeah, and that hasn't always been true. I think we should make a point out of that, ease. It has been hard in the past to manage data in these different environments because they're not the same, right? The tooling and the solutions, the technology for managing, different applications and data between these environments has improved in the last 5 years. And, that's one of the things we've embedded into our products is that this idea of managing data seamlessly across the customer's choice of cloud and making that easy.
And so just to clarify, the hybrid cloud is a balance of private cloud on-prem and public cloud.
Right. It might be your data center and, the data that resides in your servers on-prem and an Amazon S3 storage. That's a perfect example.
Right. So, and it's especially good for data protection.
It's very good. There's a lot of, there's classical use cases. We've got them listed here, but there's so many more that fit each individual business.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's now switch to the hybrid cloud solution in practical terms.
Okay.
We know the public cloud does a lot of things very well. And as we talked about, has some gaps, especially for data management, which hybrid cloud solves. So I think the number 3 topic we're going to talk about now is how the hybrid cloud solution can fill the gaps and bring the advantages of public cloud to your own data center.
Yeah, and we're really going to, again, focus on public cloud storage. As we said, it has a lot
Thank
of
you.
strength.
Yes.
Can we bring those back into our own data center and reap the same benefit? And I think, that's really kind of the unicorn that we're after.
Right. And thank you for correcting me. It's public cloud storage.
Yeah, that's, again, we need to kind of focus down and say that reproducing the whole cloud is one thing, but the storage part of it is something we can do. And I think the way we phrase it is, right, turn your data center into a private cloud storage service.
Right, exactly. Okay, so turn your data into a private cloud storage service. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Right, yeah, absolutely. So I think the idea is that we can emulate what Amazon S3 offers in an on-prem fashion, right? And really provide all of these scalability and agility and cost, pay-as-you-go advantages, but do it under the control and the sovereignty and, the cost benefit of having it on-prem. That's what we're talking about.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, so I think now we can introduce what we mean by unbreakable cloud storage for data centers.
Right. So the cloud storage part, I think we're going to talk about a little bit more, but let me talk about unbreakable, since I think that's the word that's kind of more, nuanced here. So really what we mean is it's protection from all kinds of threats, right? Data is vulnerable. It's vulnerable if you just take a server out of commission to do a planned maintenance event on it, right? Now you've sort of softened your infrastructure in some way. You can have unplanned outages. You can have power failures. You can have hardware things that fail. Software has bugs, right? Software has errors. You need to be able to protect against a single point of failure like that. And I think people even recognize now that having redundancy across different sites or data center, you need to be able to protect, right? A data center can go out. A cloud service can go out, right? So we need to protect against those type of things. And now add to that this whole thing about malicious activity, malware, ransomware. It's another compounding headache. So what we mean is that our systems are designed to protect against all of these threats. Zero data loss in the face of everything you see here on the slide.
Okay, so let's talk about how Scality makes unbreakable cloud storage possible.
Yeah, so we have two products that fit under the umbrella of classical object storage, but object storage is how Amazon S3 is expressed in terms of cloud storage. Ring is a scale-out file and object storage system. It's hybrid cloud ready. You can deploy it in your data center and actually have it interface with your public cloud. It's a cluster, so it can grow over time, and it does provide these unbreakable capabilities. Artesca is our new lightweight cloud-native object storage offering. It has the same data protection, unbreakable advantages, but it's perfect for your new Kubernetes and edge environments.
Perfect. So really, it's software for a true cloud-like experience with infinite scale.
Yes, it's designed in all the cloud design properties and hyperscaler manner. Exactly.
Great.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just talk a little bit about how it emulates the cloud experience. So really the way to think about it is that the user of our system on-prem, whether it's Ring or Artesca, sees it the same way as they would see Amazon S3. And we really mean this from a comprehensive perspective. So for example, what do you do when you go to Amazon? The first thing you do is you create your accounts and your users and you give them access keys. The exact same model applies to the Scality experience, independent of which product. Okay, you'll provision it the same way. You can even set up groups of users and policies for your access control. We authenticate it the same way. So that's the whole identity and access management model, or what people call IAM. The data model is Amazon's S3, right? It's the popular S3 API. We provide a very comprehensive implementation of that API, including the advanced features. You want to do things like version an object. You want to replicate objects. You want to lifecycle manage them. And then, of course, you want to make them immutable. So that's another thing we'll talk about here. And that relates to the Amazon S3 Object Lock API.
Okay.
But the experience is very much the same.
Okay. And we've heard customers tell us, right? You get your own private Amazon S3 experience on in your data center. Right?
Yeah. And we are actually the foundation of private clouds in many, many enterprises around the globe, including some of the biggest name banks.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's turn back now to how we protect data from the ultimate threat, which is ransomware. Can you describe?
Of course. Yeah. So we've used this term data immutability, and I think many people know it. But just to be very clear, what we mean is that data that you store in the system will not be modified if you don't desire it to be, right? So the way you store it in its original form is the way that we guarantee it will always be protected, okay? The system will not allow it to be deleted by a malicious actor of any sort. We will not allow it to be modified. That means no updates to the data, no encryption, like happens a lot in ransomware. Think of it as similar to worm media, which was, things like optical disc years ago, but now it's done in an online system, right? It's a real full online scalable system. So we provide data immutability, plus we also provide data retention policies. You can actually say, keep the data immutable for 3 months or for whatever period of time. And there's also a compliance mode, because people sometimes say, well, can't the administrator override it? And the answer is no. If you put it in a compliance mode, even the administrator can't go in and modify, delete, or change the retention policies. So this is really perfect for ransomware protection, recovery, and it even goes beyond, right? Like in financial industries, they have these SEC rules for compliance. We've been validated for that use.
Right. I think we have a Cohasset security report on our website that talks about that. So
right, they are the agency that does that validation.
Right, exactly. Okay. So let's talk about how Ring actually enables this.
Yeah, so the story is the same actually for Ring and for Artesca. So
Okay.
typically a modern data protection environment looks like this, right? You have your applications, they are running on something like a hypervisor environment like VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V. There will be some local storage there. Then you're going to deploy a backup server, right? And the one we have as an example here is Veeam. It's a very popular one. It actually supports data immutability. And what that means is that it can actually use the Ring as a capacity tier with this data immutability option. Underneath the covers, the way it's done is through the S3 object lock API, okay? As soon as a bucket is locked in that fashion, you get the properties we talked about. Data can't be deleted, can't be modified for the retention period. And that includes the administrator. This fits perfectly into this model people call 3-2-1, 3 copies of your data, 2 different types of media, and then usually you'd have an offsite copy somewhere. Now what we're saying is that offsite copy can be the immutable tier on Ring or Artesca, and it really provides the same function as this hardened immutable copy of data.
Okay, great. And I just want to turn our viewers' attention to the right-hand side of this slide. There's lots of great resources on the Veeam and Ring and ransomware story on our website. And I believe we'll have some of these assets available in the Bright Talk channel. So please take time to dig in deeper on this. Okay, so Paul, before we close, we have to get back to the cost discussion.
Yes, we did hint at this big ROI, return on investment number. So let's dig into that.
Okay, let's dig into it.
Okay, so the teaser that we gave you at the beginning was a number from a report that has been commissioned from a very reputable analyst firm, IDC. I think everybody in the enterprise IT industry knows them. What we commissioned them to do is actually talk to real world customers, our customers, and get from them this quantified hard data about how they're using the system, what use cases, and all of the different advantages that they reap, right? And you can see that they compute, and you'll see in the report all the numbers and how they prove this 366% 5-year return on investment, almost a 60% reduced TCO compared to the NAS, SAN, backup appliances, and cloud storage that they all had. They also found that their teams were much more productive and had much more time available. And I think, Julie, they even had a number about how our systems help them on their top line revenue, right?
Right.
We read that something like 68 or 69% actually use our systems in revenue generating services.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so this report is now published and available. And
actually a little bit of clarification on that stat. They actually utilize the Ring to run a majority of their revenue generating applications as well. Yeah. I mean, we're becoming primary tier 1 storage for a lot of
and we have been for years, right? I mean, we've been running analytics applications, which definitely have an impact on the top line.
Right, exactly. Okay, great stats. And what was really exciting was to hear that our customers validated these figures with IDC. It's a reminder that IDC conducted this as an exclusive private interview with customers around the world to validate these figures. So it's real.
Yeah, you said around the world. It is global. These customers were in Asia, US, and EMEA.
Right, which talks about the customers we have around the world realizing the benefits of Unbreakable cloud storage with Scality right now. That includes Comcast, who's using us for cloud store services, Wells Fargo storing data from fraud detection apps, Allstate backup and data protection, Jaguar, their cloud security and data sovereignty service provider, and then Societe Generale. My French is never good. But this is a French company. This is the French B of A.
Huge bank.
Huge bank.
French
They were
based and global.
And they actually came in and spoke to us as a company to just tell us about the Unbreakable cloud services that they're building, and we're able to tell us some great firsthand benefits that they're experiencing at our latest company, All Hands. So that was really fantastic to hear from them.
Yeah, definitely mission critical there.
Mission critical, right? Okay, so we are kind of reaching the end of our presentation here. I just want to point out a few key resources that all of the viewers here today can go and download. The first being our IDC, the business validation report by that interviewed all the customers around the world that had this 366% savings over 5 years. You can download that report. The URL is below. And then also, please check out our blog on Unbreakable Cloud Storage. It talks about all of what Paul went through and more depth, and links to other key resources. The URLs are here, but you can also get the access to these materials in the Bright Talk channel. Okay, so with that, I think we are at the end of our slide. We've reached our conclusion. So I think combining the best of public cloud storage with on-prem private cloud storage equals Unbreakable. All right, Paul?
Absolutely. And it was great to chat about this. And as you said, there's a lot more information. And I think now we're going to jump to a Q&A session.
Sounds great. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. We've had a few questions come in during the webinar, so let's get right to them, Paul.
Great.
Let's see. So the first one, was the meeting today a new, product announcement from Scality?
Yeah, so what we described today in the webinar were our current and some emerging capabilities in our products. We talked about Ring and Arteska. So it was not a new product announcement per se, but we did discuss some late advancements, things like the data immutability, the object locking features for ransomware protection. Those are newer in the product, but in general, the data protection, the Unbreakable, builds on many of the long-standing abilities we've always had to protect data from the variety of threats we talked about.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let's see the next one. Outside of ransomware protection, what else makes your products unbreakable? Okay,
it's a good question. Look, our solutions are really designed with one goal, primary goal, right? And that is to protect customers' data. It's what every storage company will say, but what really makes us different is this unique combination of capabilities. For example, we have fully distributed software-only architectures. That means no single point of failure. You can always grow. We protect data through various mechanisms. You might have heard about things like erasure coding or replication. The systems also know how to self-heal. So if you have a drive failure and some data gets lost as a result of that drive failure, we restore it. We repair it automatically. And then all of this newer data immutability functionality. So think about all those capabilities, and then it works at multi-petabyte scale. That's where those challenges really become magnified. So it's a really comprehensive approach on making the data protected and unbreakable.
Great, thanks. Let's see, we've got time for one more. Can a user error or bad actor or administrator actually delete data anyway, even though it's immutable?
Okay, I see what the question is. So this is related to ransomware protection and maybe the thought that an internal user could circumvent the protection. And we did discuss it during the webinar. Our products actually prevent that from happening. So you have this mode in ransomware protection or data immutability called compliance mode. Okay, so it's something that gets set. Usually it gets set by the application like the Veeam data protection app or maybe Commvault. And what they say is that the data gets protected for a certain period of time. That's the retention period. Once that is set in compliance mode, nobody can modify, nobody can delete, nobody can override those retention policies, even the system administrator. Okay, so if you say, 90 days of immutability, you're set, and there's no chance anybody can come in and delete or ransomware or encrypt the data.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. We've reached our the 30 minutes of our webinar. We'd like to thank everyone again for your attendance today. Thanks again, Paul and Julie, for your presentation, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.